They said I wasn't on the list. Not with words, not directly, but in the silence after my name, in the way the funeral director tilted his head, politely confused, in the way my sister clasped her pearl necklace tighter, as if I were the scandal walking in the way the church bulletin listed loving daughters and left a space between two names that once had three. My name used to be there, before the commission, before the silence, before I made my choices. But now I stood on the cold chapel steps, uniforms starched and pressed, medals dull under the gray sky, and no one came out to greet me. The cars kept arriving. Cousins I hadn't seen in 10 years stepped out in black, with the same sidelong glance one I knew from boot camp. The look that asks, "Why are you here?" You know that look, don't you? You've seen it in rooms where everyone claims to love you, yet they pass the salt around your hand, never through it. You've heard it in the way a name isn't spoken even when it should have been whispered like prayer. I arrived 25 minutes early, because habit and protocol are the only things left when love is gone. I parked 2 blocks down, under the same tree, where my mother once waited in the car during violin practice. She never missed a lesson, even when she didn't believe I'd make first chair. She waited. But today, I wasn't expected. Inside my jacket, the badge of my last mission pressed against my ribs. A coin I was never supposed to have. A symbol of something done in silence, on foreign soil, with no name attached. It burned cold. I walked the gravel path slowly, the kind of slow that says, I know I don't belong here, but I came anyway. The kind of pace you learn in covert ops-controlled steps. Eyes scanning, spine straight. No emotion shown until you're past the guard post. And this whole family had become just that, a guarded checkpoint. At the entryway of the chapel, I paused. A young usher, maybe 20, glanced up. His eyes scanned the sheet. Then me, then back again. Name, he asked, clipboard trembling slightly. I could smell his uncertainty. Commander Ellen Whitlock, I said evenly. The name felt heavier than usual. Maybe because it had never been spoken in this place, not around these people. He looked again. I don't have you here, ma'am. Of course you don't. My sister's doing, no doubt. She had planned the service. She'd taken charge, as they say, which is code for erasing me. I didn't flinch, just nodded. Understood. I took a seat in the very back row, not pews. Just folding chairs they'd added for overflow. Funny. The woman who'd held encrypted battle plans in her hands now became overflow. The air smelled like lilies and old hymns, the kind of sterile sadness that people pretend is sacred. The slideshow began. Pictures of my mother as a girl, as a bride, as a mother of 2, only 2. I wasn't even a ghost in those frames, just a deletion. There was a photo one I remembered clearly. Mom, in her garden, arms around all 3 daughters. I knew where I'd stood between her and the rose bush, my head tilted awkwardly from sun in my eyes. But now, in the slideshow, I was gone, cropped, like a surgical removal. Do you know what it's like to watch your entire childhood and not see yourself? That's not grief. That's obliteration. I adjusted my cuffs. The silence around me grew louder. My brother walked past me and didn't stop. My sister walked past me and narrowed her eyes like I was an intruder in Mother's house. I looked down at my gloves, folded neatly in my lap. You know what discipline does. It teaches you how to hold your breath for entire days. The service began. The pastor spoke about devotion, kindness, faith, about a mother who loved her daughters deeply. I wanted to laugh, but instead, I just blinked. Once. Slowly. Like we do in field interrogation, the pause that lets the lie expose itself. Because here's the thing, my mother had loved me. Once. Before the silence. Before I wore the uniform more often than I called home. Before classified papers took the place of birthday cards. She never said it that she was proud. But I caught it. Once. In her voice when she left a voicemail. Stay safe. They need women like you. Women like me. The kind who disappear into wars they can't speak of. The kind who come home and are met not with flags, but closed doors. Midway through the service. A sharp knock on the chapel's side entrance shifted the room. 2 naval officers stepped inside. Their presence cut through the air like static clean, precise, silent. They wore ceremonial white. One held the tri-folded flag. You could feel the judgment shift then. Whispers sparked. My aunt leaned toward my cousin. My father's hand clenched the hymnal tighter. The officers walked past the pews, past the whispers, past every single person who had pretended I wasn't real. They stopped in front of me. Commander Whitlock. One said, saluting. Your presence has been noted. We've been instructed to deliver this directly. The flag. Folded. Heavy. It didn't matter that I wasn't on the program, or in the photos, or in my sister's smug imagination of who deserved remembrance. I stood slowly, took the flag with gloved hands, held it close to my chest, as I'd once held encrypted codes and field casualty reports and bloodied dog tags. But this was heavier. The entire chapel turned, their eyes no longer avoiding me now. They couldn't look away. Have you ever witnessed your own resurrection? It doesn't come with trumpets. It comes with silence. Except this time, it's their silence. I didn't speak, didn't thank them, didn't explain. I just nodded once, crisply, the way we do in mission debriefings when the objective has been met. Then I sat again, with the flag, still in the overflow row. But now I was the only one who'd been saluted. They tried not to stare after that, but the air had changed, thickened. Even the lilies on the altar seemed to stiffen under the weight of the folded triangle in my lap. I didn't move. I didn't fidget. In this uniform, even grief has posture. The pastor cleared his throat, unsure how to continue. His hands shuffled the pages, and his voice cracked slightly as he introduced my sister for the eulogy. Of course, the golden child, the homemaker, the one who never missed a birthday, a bake sale, or a church fundraiser, the one who never left. She stepped up to the pulpit in a black sheath dress, perfectly hemmed, a lace veil clipped into place. She smiled softly, the kind of smile that plays innocence to the crowd while stabbing daggers beneath the pews. My mother, she began, was the anchor of this family. She believed in kindness, in tradition, and in showing up. Always showing up. A pause, meant to land like judgment. She was devoted to her daughters. She said she didn't need riches, just to see her girls gathered around her table. Another pause, a flicker of eyes toward the crowd. She hated division. She believed in unity. Even when it was hard, I could feel it, the unspoken, the knife concealed in the silk. She said we should love each other, even when one of us strays. There it was. No one flinched. Not really. But a few eyes glanced toward me, then away, like watching a storm form on the horizon. Have you ever been blamed in public through words that sound like scripture? Have you ever been rewritten in real time, your story, your reasons, your service reduced to stray? She ended with a story about mother's hands, how they smelled like lavender and dish soap, how they bandaged skinned knees and tied birthday ribbons, how they held hers during childbirth. She never mentioned the hand that gripped mine the night before I deployed for the first time, the one that trembled not because she was scared for me, but because she knew. Deep down, she knew I wouldn't come back the same. And I didn't. You don't come back from black sites and body extractions with birthday cake in your breath. My sister stepped down to polite applause. It felt wrong, but everyone clapped anyway. Funeral decorum, grief theater. Then came the music. A soft hymn played over the speakers. I recognized it immediately. Be Still My Soul. The same song they played at my grandmother's funeral, the one I watched through a live stream in a metal shipping container in Syria. Headphones on, tears unshed. I glanced at the stained glass window near the front. A soft blue Virgin Mary looked down, eyes vacant. Not mourning, not even watching, just quiet. I stood, gently folding the flag under my arm, and walked toward the back of the chapel. I needed air. Outside, the wind had picked up. A handful of petals from the memorial wreath scattered down the stone steps. I took them in, one by one, the colors, the cold, the ache of it all. You'd think coming home would heal something. It doesn't. Coming home only shows you how far you've gone. The door opened behind me. Footsteps. I didn't turn. I didn't know they were sending the flag. My brother's voice came, hesitant. I didn't think you'd even come. You didn't want me to, I said, without turning. He shifted his weight. I could hear it, that discomfort men carry when they've followed orders too long, even the unspoken family kind. It was complicated, he said. No, it wasn't. He hesitated again. She didn't know how to reach you. I turned to him then, slowly. I've had the same government-issued address for 11 years. One letter. That's all it would have taken. He looked at the flag. She didn't tell us about the commendation, the citation, any of it. She didn't tell you, I corrected. She told me. That stopped him. She sent me a handwritten note after Kabul. I keep it in a sealed bag, in my locker. She said she didn't understand my world, but she was proud. He blinked. Hard. Why didn't you tell us? Would it have changed anything, I asked? Would I have been on the list then? Would my name have been in the program? He looked down. That's what I thought. We stood in silence. The chapel organ began playing again inside muffled chords, pushing against the stained glass like ghosts. I didn't come for you, I said finally. I didn't come for her approval either. I came because she raised me better than this. A car pulled up then. Government plates. The driver didn't get out, just waited. Engine low. Ready. I looked back at my brother. I have another ceremony this afternoon. They're dedicating a wall at the base, for the ones we didn't bring home. He nodded slowly. Tell them what you want, I said. Tell them I ran away. Tell them I didn't care. You're good at rewriting stories. He opened his mouth, maybe to apologize, maybe to defend, but I was already turning away. As I walked down the chapel steps, the petals crunched under my boots. There was no applause, no cameras, no audience, just wind, gravel, and silence. And somehow, it felt truer than anything said inside. The car door opened. The driver saluted. I returned it. But before stepping in, I looked once more at the chapel behind me, not with longing, not with pain, but with clarity. You see, when you've stared death in the face, real death, brutal death, the kind they hide from families and newspapers, you stop fearing the death of reputation. You stop chasing permission to exist. They erased me from the bulletin, but they couldn't erase the truth. And the truth had been folded, sealed, and handed to me first. The car door closed with the soft, mechanical finality of military precision. No slam, no drama, just the click of a system designed to protect. I didn't ask the driver's name. He didn't ask questions. He knew better. I sat back, flag still in my lap, and let the quiet fill me. There's a silence you learn in intelligence work, not the absence of noise, but the presence of control. A silence you cultivate like a weapon, one that suffocates chaos without ever raising your voice. We pulled onto the freeway, headed east. The sky was wide now. The clouds split open like torn cotton. Light streamed through like something biblical. And still, all I could hear was her voice, not the sharp one from childhood, not the quiet disappointment from early deployments, but the soft one, the one I remembered from my last call home just before the blackout operation in Tashkent. "They'll never understand you, Ellen," she had said. Her voice cracked by distance and age. "But that doesn't mean you're wrong." That call lasted 7 minutes. She didn't ask what I was doing. She didn't ask where I was going. She just said she was lighting a candle for me. Every Thursday. That candle never made the slideshow. The car passed a weathered sign, Fort Ashbrook. 2 miles. The base wasn't my home anymore. Not officially, but it still recognized me. The guards at the gate nodded. One of them stiffened when he saw the silver cluster of medals on my chest. I saw the flicker of recognition, not of me as a person, but of the pattern, the kind of ribbon that only comes with shadow missions and unspeakable orders. We drove in silence through the rows of cement and command, past the motor pool, past the intelligence wing I helped design. The ceremony wasn't large, maybe 30 people, mostly in uniform. A few civilians. A wall newly unveiled, etched with names, not famous ones. Just initials and dates and silence. I stood beside the brass podium, unnoticed at first. I wanted it that way. I didn't wear rank on my sleeve, not today. Just the service uniform, pressed crisp. Buttons dulled by salt and age. A colonel I'd once reported to Major Reese, now promoted, was giving a speech. I half listened as he honored the fallen, recited dates, offered protocol words that sounded sincere, though practiced. Words the world needs to hear, even if no one really listens. Then he paused. "Before we conclude," he said, voice shifting, "we'd like to recognize someone whose service has always remained behind the veil, whose record speaks not in pages, but in shadows. Commander Ellen Whitlock." The heads turned. He didn't look at me, not directly, but gestured subtly. I stepped forward. "The last operation Ellen commanded saved 27 lives," he said, voice firmer now, "and cost 2. 2 names on this wall. Both volunteered to follow her. Both called her the one who doesn't flinch." I hadn't expected that. He continued. "We don't talk enough about the ones who lead in silence, who return to find their names missing from dinner tables and family prayers. But history knows, and history remembers." He nodded once. That was all. Applause followed, soft, respectful, uncoached. I didn't speak. Not then. What would I say? That I'd just come from a funeral where my mother's obituary read like a redacted file, that my name had been stripped like a dishonor, only to be handed a flag by strangers. No. Silence was enough. After the ceremony, people lingered, not to mourn, but to remember, the way soldiers do, with nods, with long gazes, with hands on stone. A woman approached me, civilian clothes, blazer and low heels, late 40s. Maybe. She held a small photograph in one hand, trembling. "Ma'am," she said. I turned. She held it up. A man in uniform, young, smiling, eyes familiar. "My son," she said. "Private Keller. He served with you in Delta Recon." I nodded. I remembered. He'd been just 19. Eager. Brave. The kind of brave that doesn't know it's temporary. "He said you taught him how to stay calm," she whispered. "Said if anything ever happened, he wanted me to know you were the reason he lasted as long as he did." Her eyes glassed, but no tears fell. "I never got to meet you," she said. but I wanted to say thank you. That word. Thank you. I'd been called many things. Ghost, weapon, liability, hero, but rarely that. Your son was brave, I said softly. He followed orders without question, and he sang when we were trapped in the basin, sang to keep the others from panicking. She closed her eyes at that. A small sound escaped her lips, but she didn't break. She pressed the photo into my hand. Keep him with you. I did. After she left, I stood alone for a while. Have you ever felt a pain that isn't yours and carried it anyway? That's what command is. Not glory, not medals, just the weight of what others no longer can carry. The car ride back was quiet again. I didn't return to the family house. I didn't check if they'd already started dividing Mother's things. They would. They always do. Instead, I went back to the room I'd rented near the train station, Spartan, clean. One framed photo, not of family, but of an aerial shot of the South China Sea, a gift from an analyst I once saved. I placed the folded flag gently on the desk. Next to it, the photograph of Private Keller. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared for a long time. There's a moment in every mission, every life where you realize you've been fighting for the wrong home, that the bloodline you came from is not always the one you belong to, that sometimes the people who bury you with words while you still live are the ones who fear your return the most. Because you've changed. Because you've become something they cannot control, cannot define, cannot reduce. And they will punish you for that, but not forever. The knock came just before midnight. I opened the door. It was my father. He stood there in his funeral suit, collar loose, tie undone, eyes sunken. He hadn't looked at me once during the service, hadn't even acknowledged the flag. But now he was here, alone. He looked at me as if unsure who I was. He started. His voice cracked. I didn't speak. I didn't know. He whispered. About the citations, the flag, any of it. I still said nothing. She told me once, he added, that you scared her. Not because you were wrong, but because you were braver than she'd ever dared to be. My throat tightened, but I kept still. He looked down. I'm sorry. It wasn't enough, but it was something. He turned to leave, but then paused. I couldn't stop your sister. She hated how much you reminded Mom of herself, and with that, he was gone. I didn't chase him. Didn't need to. Some ghosts don't need to be exorcised, just seen. I didn't sleep that night. Not from grief. Not even from memory. But from something colder, the sharp clarity that comes after a mission ends and you realize you have nowhere to report. No debrief. No file to lock. Just yourself. Alone with the facts that can't be redacted. My hands rested on the edge of the flag all night, not unfolding it, not clutching it, just grounding myself against something that still meant something, something no one could edit. At dawn, the light came in sideways through the thin beige curtains, the kind of light that doesn't ask for permission, it just arrives, like truth or consequence. I brewed coffee on the small stovetop and drank it standing. No cream, no sugar, no comfort, just heat. You learn to function like this in intelligence mornings that start without greeting, meals without conversation, identities that only exist inside code names. They say it dehumanizes you. They're wrong. It lets you see clearly who you are without being defined by the room. By 0700 I was dressed again. Same uniform. No changes. I didn't need a fresh shirt to reclaim ground. The wrinkles had become a kind of armor now. I pinned on one commendation the highest because if they wouldn't call me by my name, they could damn well call me by my record. I stepped outside, and the sky had turned the color of clean steel. I walked, 3 blocks to the corner bakery. The same one Mom used to take me to before piano recitals. Back when I still thought applause could make a person feel seen. The bell over the door jingled like it always had. Inside, a few older folks sat with quiet conversation and steaming mugs. The woman behind the counter had a gray braid and crow's feet around her eyes. She didn't recognize me. Anything fresh, I asked. She pointed to a tray of warm rolls. I picked one, handed her exact change, and waited as she bagged it. The paper was thin, slightly waxed, the kind I remembered from childhood, catching cinnamon sugar on my fingertips. Before she handed it to me, she paused. Eyes narrowed slightly. Say, were you at the funeral yesterday? I met her gaze. Yes. She nodded slowly. Didn't see you on the program. There it was. The clean, harmless knife of small-town women, casual, coated in sweetness, serrated just beneath the surface. I said nothing. She handed me the bag. Well, that flag looked sharp in your arms. I'll say that much. I nodded once. Thank you. And I left. Outside, I leaned against the cold brick wall and took a bite of the roll. Still warm, still good, and still tasted like being both 10 years old and 1,000 lifetimes away. You ever notice how taste carries time better than memory? I walked slowly past the old post office, the war memorial, the shuttered bookstore where Mom used to buy me spy novels without ever saying why. I kept walking until I reached the cemetery. I didn't mean to, but maybe I did. It was quiet, wind in the trees, leaves crunching softly underfoot. I found her stone easily. They'd chosen a modest slab, pearl gray, her name etched in careful script. No epitaph, just birth, death, nothing in between. How fitting. I stood there a long while, not speaking, just being, until something inside cracked open, not loudly, just released. I came. I whispered. Not because she asked, not because they wanted me to, but because I had to. You didn't stop them from cutting me out. I said. But you didn't stop lighting that candle either. I set the bag down beside the stone. The roll. Still warm. Still soft. The kind she used to break in half for me. And then, I pulled the photo from my pocket, Private Keller. Folded but clean. I pressed it against the base of her headstone and held it there a moment. He died in my care, I said, and I still carry him. Wind brushed my face, dry and light. You were wrong to be afraid of me, I whispered. But I understand. I closed my eyes. You raised a soldier, I said, not a daughter. But I made peace with that. You ever have to forgive someone who never asked? It's the cleanest kind of pain, sharp, precise, permanent. I turned to leave, not because I was finished, but because I knew I wouldn't be finished for years, maybe ever. Halfway down the gravel path, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. It was my sister. She wore no veil now, no makeup, just a long coat and fury in her walk. You came here, she snapped. I did. You left the service, she said, voice rising. You disappeared. You didn't even call her on her last birthday. I was deployed, always with the excuses. She hissed. She wrote me. I said evenly. She froze. She lit a candle for me every Thursday. She stared. The wind caught her coat, flaring it slightly. You're lying. I reached into my inner pocket and pulled out the note, still sealed in the protective sleeve I carried in my field pack. I handed it to her. She didn't take it. She never told me about this. She said, barely audible, because she knew you wouldn't understand. Her eyes welled, not with grief, with rage. You think you're better than us? Just because you wear that uniform and everyone salutes you? No, I said. I know I'm not like you. And I stopped apologizing for that. You're still not family. I nodded. I know. And I turned to leave. But before I took another step, I said over my shoulder, "But they gave me the flag." I didn't look back. Didn't need to. Her silence followed me down the path like a shadow unraveling. Back at the room, I undressed slowly, folded the uniform, set the commendation aside. I stood in the mirror for a long moment, plain t-shirt, bare face, no armor. This was who they hated. Not the soldier, not the name, but the woman who refused to vanish. You see, there's a power in returning not to be embraced, but to bear witness. To stand in the room where you were erased and not beg to be written back in. To walk out carrying only the truth, and the flag they couldn't take from you. I packed the next morning with the kind of precision you don't lose, not even after months away from protocol. One duffel, one case. Everything folded. Nothing sentimental, except the flag, which I placed flat beneath my uniform. Not out of reverence, but clarity. If they needed to search my bag at the airport, let them see what I carry. Let them try to measure the weight. The train station was only 10 minutes away, but I arrived an hour early. Habit. Timing is the last ritual of control. In operations, you learn that the person who waits quietly at the edge of a crowd sees everything first. And today, I didn't need to be seen, I just needed to observe. One more exit. One more quiet reclaiming. There were people at the platform already. A young couple with a baby. An old man with 2 suitcases and a scowl. A girl in ROTC camo, nervously clutching her phone. I saw myself in her, not in the skin or the posture, but the readiness. The almost shaking strength of a woman who hasn't yet realized how far she'll have to go just to be taken seriously. She looked at me once, eyes catching on my shoes. The stiffness of my spine, the kind of look that doesn't know why it's drawn, but knows enough to respect it. I nodded. She nodded back. That's all it takes. Sometimes between women like us. 1 second. One look. A transmission. I see you. I know what this will cost. Do it anyway. You know that language. Don't you? The train arrived on time, sliding into the station like a decision you can't take back. I boarded without hesitation. Window seat. South-facing. I wanted the sun. I needed it to burn off the last of the cold that had settled in my chest. The conductor walked past, barely glancing. I could have been anyone. Civilian, visitor, widow, warrior. That's the thing about uniforms. Once you're out of sight, they vanish. Just like names on a list. Just like daughters who leave home and don't return in the right way. As the train pulled away from the station, the town grew smaller behind the glass. The church steeple, the cemetery's rows, the family house just beyond the tree line hidden. But I knew the shape of its roof like I knew the layout of every war zone I'd survived. I didn't look back. Instead, I pulled out the small envelope I'd tucked in my inner pocket since the funeral, the one my mother had sent after Kabul. Her handwriting was sharp, slanted, no nonsense. Ellen, I don't understand what you do, but I see how you walk now, how your voice changed. I lit a candle for you. Every Thursday, they'll never understand you, but that doesn't mean you're wrong. No love, Mom, no signature. Just the truth. That letter had gone with me everywhere, across continents, across war zones, across betrayal. It had never made it into the family scrapbook, never been read aloud at church. But it was real, and I had it. Do you know what it's like to carry the only proof that you mattered to someone and have no one believe it exists? That's the kind of weight you don't set down. You integrate it. Like a scar that becomes part of your fingerprint. The train rolled faster now, eating up the miles, And for the first time in weeks, I let myself breathe deeply. There's a different kind of oxygen when you're finally leaving the place that made you disappear. I closed my eyes. I remembered the look on my sister's face, frozen not in grief, but in fury. Fury that the flag had been handed to me. Fury that despite everything, despite the silence, despite being erased, I still stood taller than any of them. But I wasn't angry anymore. I was finished. There's a kind of peace in no longer needing to be heard. There's power in knowing your record is written elsewhere in files they'll never see, in missions they'll never comprehend, in medals they'll only recognize when strangers stand for them. They'll pass the family album around one day, to children, to grandchildren. They'll say my name quietly, or not at all. They'll fumble the details, get the rank wrong, skip over the parts that challenge the story. But someone, maybe that ROTC girl, maybe someone who reads a footnote in a military ledger, someone will know. And that's enough. The uniform doesn't need their approval. The silence doesn't need to be broken. It just needs to be seen. We stopped briefly at a town halfway between my past and whatever this new version of the future would be. A woman stepped on mid-50s, carrying a folded coat and a book with dog-eared pages. She looked exhausted in that way women get when they've spent decades being the responsible one. She sat beside me without a word, adjusted her bag, and exhaled. 10 minutes passed before she spoke. Coming from a funeral, she asked, nodding at the flag. I turned. Her tone wasn't casual. It was familiar. Yes, I said. Yours. It caught me off guard, but then I realized what she meant, the way she'd said it. Not someone else's funeral. Mine. In a way. Yes. My mother's. I replied, but also a few other things. She nodded. Didn't press. My husband's was 20 years ago, she said. Still carry his medals. Not for him. Really. For me. So I remember I survived it. She looked at me then, deeply, kindly. I hope they saluted you, she added. I didn't answer, but I reached over just slightly and adjusted the corner of the flag, letting the triangle of blue and white show clearly. That was answer enough. She smiled faintly, then turned back to her book. And I just looked out the window. Fields blurred by, roads split into ribbons. The sun warmed my knees through the glass. I didn't have a destination in mind. Not yet. Just a direction. But maybe that's all a soldier ever needs when the war ends. A clean line forward. A name not whispered. A silence that belongs to her now, and no one else. The train rocked gently as it sped forward. And for the first time in years, I wasn't traveling toward a mission. I wasn't running toward a war, or running from a silence. I was simply moving. That kind of motion feels unnatural when you're used to orders, when every movement is choreographed by a superior's word, a redacted document, a classified objective. But now, no one was tracking me. No handler, no chain of command. Just a woman in uniform with no destination printed on the ticket, only a direction. East. You'd think freedom feels like breath, but it doesn't. It feels like vertigo, like standing at the edge of a building and realizing no one will pull you back. No one is watching. No one is waiting. Except maybe you. Yes, you. Have you ever rebuilt your sense of self from the ashes of a room that once pretended you didn't exist? Have you ever felt the echo of every erased memory tap you on the shoulder, asking, "Are you going to disappear too?" I didn't. I wouldn't. Not again. The woman beside me had fallen asleep. Her hand rested lightly over her book, and the corner of a yellowed page trembled every time the train shifted. I studied the back of her hand, the veins, the slight twitch of a muscle beneath the skin, and it reminded me of my mother's hand that last night I saw her. Not in the hospital, But years earlier, she had reached for my face before I deployed to Ramadi. No words, just touch. And I saw it in her eyes then, the ache of a mother who knew her daughter had chosen something sacred but unspeakable, who knew I had become untouchable, not because I was wrong, but because I was elsewhere. That was our last moment of peace. After that, it was clipped phone calls, misunderstood holidays, and silence that calcified into blame. You don't always know when the rupture begins. It never comes with a bang. It just starts with a missed birthday and ends with your name missing from the funeral program. But some things never vanish, not completely. Her candle, her voice, however rare, and that folded note. I reached into my bag again, pulled it out, read it slowly. They'll never understand you, but that doesn't mean you're wrong. What would it have meant if she'd said that in front of them? In front of my sister, my father, would anything have changed? No, but maybe I wouldn't have had to carry that line like a weapon in my chest. The train conductor passed again. He tipped his hat slightly at the flag, and then at me. Didn't ask for anything, just acknowledged. It was a small thing, but when you've been made invisible, every small thing lands like thunder. We stopped again, this time at a coastal station. Through the glass, I could see fishermen stacking crates, teenagers kicking gravel by the edge of the platform, a mother lifting her child to point at the passing cars. I thought about stepping off, not permanently, just to breathe salt air, but I didn't. Not yet. I stayed. Some ghosts are better carried than buried. The woman beside me stirred. She blinked, sat up straighter, and rubbed her eyes. You ever go back? She asked me softly. To what? To wherever it was you were before? I thought about that. I thought about base after base, black sites, mission briefs whispered over satellite phones. The way a hotel in Prague once smelled like gun oil and lilacs because I'd stayed up all night cleaning a Glock beside a broken vase. No, I said. She nodded like she understood. I tried once, she said. Went back to the apartment where we lived. Stood outside. Couldn't even walk up the steps. I realized I didn't belong to that version of me anymore. Yeah, I whispered. Exactly that. People don't get it, she said. They think we walk away from them. But really, they just stopped walking with us. That stayed with me, long after she got off 3 stops later, waving goodbye without needing my name. That woman, she didn't know my past. She didn't ask my rank. But she gave me something no ceremony had yet. A quiet moment of understanding. A human one. By the time we reached the end of the line, it was almost dusk. The sun burned low, casting long gold fingers across the cityscape. I stepped onto the platform and felt something click. Not pain, not grief, just landing. You know the feeling, don't you? When your boots touch solid ground and you realize no one's chasing you. Not memory, not duty, not family. You are not being summoned. I walked the platform slowly. Around me, the crowd spilled and thinned. A man was playing violin near the entrance, something classical, mournful, and patient. I paused to listen, let the weight of it settle in my chest. I wondered when was the last time I heard music that wasn't played at a memorial. I closed my eyes, and for a moment, it was all there. Every mission, every extraction, every person I'd saved, everyone I hadn't. My mother's hands, my sister's cold stare, my brother's silence, the weight of the flag pressed to my ribs like a second heartbeat. But I didn't crumble. I just stood there. And when the music ended, I left something on the stone beside his case. Not coins, but the photograph of Private Keller, folded carefully, face down, his name written on the back in my hand. He would be remembered here too, not in stone, but in sound. I walked to the edge of the plaza, unsure where I'd sleep. I had enough clearance to stay at any base in the region, enough money to rent silence for weeks. But part of me didn't want any of that. I wanted to just exist, as a woman, as a name that didn't need explaining, as a soldier whose war was finally, quietly, over. That's when my phone buzzed. It hadn't in days. No family, no condolences, but now one message, from the secretary's office. 3 words, come to DC. No explanation, no threat, just an invitation. You see, when the right people know what you've done, the real record there is no forgetting, and that is the difference between family and history. I pocketed the phone, watched the sun dip behind the buildings, and whispered to no one. Let them say what they want, because they had already written me out, but the world had just written me in. I arrived in Washington 3 days later. No fanfare, no escort, just a commercial flight and a seat by the window, where I watched clouds stack like marble altars and thought of all the times I'd flown under different names, different passports. Faces I wore like gloves, slipping them on when the mission called, peeling them off when I returned to a place no longer home. But this was my name now, my face, my record. They couldn't erase it, not even the ones who tried. The black car that met me at Reagan didn't have a government plate, but the driver wore a pin. I recognized a silver triangle. Quiet ops, unacknowledged, even in the Pentagon. He didn't speak. He just opened the door and nodded, the way men do when they've seen too much and chosen silence over salutes. We passed familiar buildings, the Rotunda, the Capitol Dome, the long corridors of marble and ambition. But I wasn't here for the theater. I was here because someone had decided that I was no longer invisible. The car stopped outside an office I knew only by code name. No brass plaque, no security guards posted in view. Just a gray building with mirrored glass that reflected back the world and offered no entry unless you were already invited. Inside, I was met by a woman in her early 60s, white hair pulled into a bun, clipboard tucked beneath her arm, civilian dress. But her stance was pure field clearance, heels planted, spine straight, every step chosen. "Commander Whitlock," she said. "He's waiting for you." I followed her down the hallway, carpeted, narrow, lit by soft fluorescents designed to reveal nothing. At the last door, she paused and looked at me. "You've done a lot for people who'll never say thank you," she said. "This isn't gratitude. It's acknowledgement." I nodded. Then I stepped inside. The room was plain, a large wooden desk, a window with the blinds half drawn, a single flag in the corner. The man behind the desk wore no insignia, but I knew who he was. Secretary of Defense. He stood. "Commander." I saluted. He waved it off. "No need. Not today." I sat. He didn't read from a file, didn't quote mission logs or use the stiff language of citation. Instead, he leaned forward, his hands folded. I read the reports. He said, "Not just the official ones, the ones your teams filed in secure back channels, the things that never make it past the black lines of redaction." I said nothing. "Do you know how many women have led what you've led?" he asked. I shook my head. "Less than a dozen, and only one who walked out of it and didn't ask for a damn thing." He opened a drawer, pulled out a small box, set it between us. Silver, matte, unlabeled. "This is not a medal," he said. "It's a record, a permanent entry into the archive." I knew what he meant. The archive wasn't a public wall. It wasn't something the press covered or the president tweeted about. It was deeper than that. A record of those who had done the unspeakable, the unimaginable, in service of something larger and had never asked for applause. "You've been erased enough," he said. "This makes it official. You exist. Permanently." I stared at the box, and for the first time, I felt it. Not pride, not validation, but relief. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for my family's recognition, not for my sister's apology, not for my father's halting words in a hallway, not even for my mother's voice in a letter. I didn't need any of it. The silence was mine now. I took the box, didn't open it, just held it. He stood again, walked to the flag, rested his hand on the pole. "One more thing," he said. "Your name came up for the memorial committee. They want someone to represent the silent operations, the ones no one dares name." I told them I knew just the person. I met his eyes. "Will I be listed?" He smiled, the faintest flicker. "This time, you're at the top." I left the building the way I came, quietly, with no announcement. The driver took me not to a hotel, but to Arlington. The grass there is always too green, the air always too still. But the stones don't lie. They mark who mattered, even when no one else would. I walked through the rows until I reached the quadrant reserved for unnamed missions. The headstones here bore initials, dates, coordinates. I knelt in front of one, not for show, not for grief, but for memory, for the ones I'd left, for the ones who didn't get folded flags, who didn't get slideshows, who didn't get sisters whispering lies into the organ music. Just silence. And now, a name. Mine. I took the flag from my bag, held it against my knees, and I whispered, "You weren't erased. I see you." Then I stood. I didn't cry. Not because I couldn't, because I didn't need to anymore. That night, I walked the length of the reflecting pool. Tourists were sparse. Lights shimmered on the water like ribbons of history. I thought of that little girl I used to be, sitting at the kitchen table, tracing constellations in the military atlas while my sister played piano and my mother braided her hair. I was always looking for maps back then, for routes out. I found them. And when I couldn't, I made them. You ever look in the mirror and see not a daughter, not a sister, not a name on a tree, but a whole continent that no one else can cross? I do. I am. At the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, I stopped. A tourist was crying quietly nearby. I didn't ask why, didn't intrude. I just stood a few paces away, still, until the woman turned, saw the box in my hand, the crease of my uniform, the posture of someone no longer seeking permission. She whispered, "Are you military?" I looked at her for a long moment. Then I said, not proudly, not softly, but finally, "Yes." She smiled, "Thank you," and walked away. I stood there until the wind picked up. Then I closed my eyes and said nothing, because I didn't need them to respect me. The whole world already did.